Welcome everyone to this Energy Exchanges. This is the number 6 Energy Exchanges that we're having from ICLEI, this time on supporting the sustainable energy transition in cities and regions. Next slide, please. Just before we go ahead, with some housekeeping. For the Q&A, we encourage your interaction. So after and during the speaker's intervention, we will have the chat open so you can ask questions and share your insights on the topics. After both speakers, we will have a Q&A session in which you can raise your questions directly to the speakers. In order to do that, you can raise your hand and post your questions in the chat. Please be aware that this webinar will be recorded for future reference and for participants who are unable to attend today. This recording will be made available after the session on our project website and ICLEI's YouTube channel. The presentation materials at the end of the webinar will be shared on our project website. Thank you for your attention. Next slide, please. For those of you that don't know so much about ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability is a global network working with more than 2,500 local and regional governments committed to sustainable urban development. Active in more than 125 countries, we influence sustainability policy and drive local action for low-emission, nature-based, equitable, resilient, and circular development. Next slide, please. For those of you that are wondering what are the energy exchanges, today in our energy exchange, we want to focus on a specific topic. We aim to bridge planning and action, keeping in mind local context. It is a series of virtual exchanges offering deep dives into solutions for the local sustainable energy transition. And it is directed to local governments, practitioners, and experts in the domain. The reason for the exchange today is to facilitate bridging the gap between action and planning, taking into account the unique local context. Throughout this series of virtual exchanges, we will provide in-depth insights into solutions that are well suited for local sustainable energy transition, which is aimed, again, for local government experts and practitioners in the field. Next slide, please. Today, our featured experts and guest speakers are, from one hand, Irais Vázquez. She is technical lead specialist at Climate Bonds Initiative. She joined CBI after working. Sorry, Irais. If you would like to introduce yourself, please go ahead.
No, I think you can do it greatly. But yeah, thank you for inviting me. This is a great pleasure to be with you. As Jaume said, I'm Irais Vázquez. I'm Mexican. I'm based in London, and I'm the technical lead specialist and assurance manager of the Climate Bonds Initiative technical assistance team. I've been part of the CBI family for almost 3 years now. My background is in finance, and I have a PhD in environmental science and technology. Before I joined CBI, I used to work for the Ministry of Environment, especially working with municipalities and cities in Mexico. So pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you, Irais. Our next guest speaker as well is Peter Malika. He's the Global Manager of the Local Finance Initiative and Chief Technical Advisor at the United Nations Capital Development Fund. Peter, would you like to give a few words about yourself?
All right. Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Again, my name is Peter Malika. I'm from the United Nations Capital Development Fund, and I look forward to our exchanges in energy solutions, specifically innovative finance and finance solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Irais. Thank you, Peter. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Irais to present her slides.
Great, thank you very much, Jaume. So I will share my screen. And if you please confirm that
Yes, we can see your slides.
you are able to see my slides. Okay, great. Okay, so hello everyone again. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, representing the Climate Bonds Initiative. And just to start with this presentation, I would like to first introduce who we are. So for those that doesn't know us, we are a global investor-focused organization that mobilized debt capital markets for climate change solution. That means mitigation and adaptation and resilience. And the organization, well, we support long-term investments to accelerate the transition to a low-carbon economy through sustainable term financial instruments such as green bonds, green loans, and sustainability-linked bonds, and some other instruments that I will explain further in my presentation. And how do we achieve our mission, our goals? You know, like we do it through three main pillars, the ones that you can see here in the screen. So the first one is the development of international markets, green markets. And as you can see in the map, although our headquarters are in London, we have regional teams around the globe. So that's one of our strategies, you know, to have teams all around the globe to start mobilizing international green markets. Our second pillar is to ensure the credibility of markets to be aligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement, right? The 1.5 or 2 degrees goals. And how do we achieve this? Well, our purpose is that we create the certification scheme for labeled debt instruments that contain assets and projects aligned with our standard and our eligibility criteria. And also further in the presentation, I will talk about these eligibility criteria specifically for energy assets and projects. And our third pillar is well, the database analyst and market research. We have a whole market intelligence team that develops annual reports, and also we offer to the public public database of green bonds issued around the globe. So that's the way that we achieve our main goals. And now I would like to offer you and explain you the financial overview around green bonds, right? So first in this diagram, if we start reading it from right to left, we can see that the universe of, I would call it, ordinary or traditional finance is mainly composed by vanilla, either bonds or loans, right? So typically how these either loans or bonds are the typically way of finance any project or any asset, right? And then if we start to move to the right, to the left, we can see that the sustainable finance is a subset of finance and of the financial universe, and it is composed by different labeled instruments, like for example SLBs, which are linked to KPIs, performance indicators, either social bonds, SDG bonds, or loans. These could be bonds or loans. Also pandemic bonds. After the COVID crisis, we saw in the market a high increase on these kind of debt instruments, right? And then if we go like more inside to the diagram, we see the green finance universe, right? With within the sustainable finance universe, we have the green finance, which deals with financing of projects and assets with various environmental objectives, not only climate change, but also can be related with biodiversity protection, pollution prevention, circular economy, and so on and so forth. And then inside the universe of green finance, we have the climate finance, right? Which in this blue circle, the main objective is to fundraise projects related either with mitigation or adaptation to climate change. And then we can see the green bonds that overlap. And I will explain you what. They are part either of both, right? Of the climate finance and also of green finance, because green bonds can, the objective is to fundraise projects that can be related only with climate change, but also can be related with other environmental objectives, like the ones that I have already explained, like water, use efficiency, biodiversity protection, circular economy, and so on and so forth. And I will also like to highlight that the global bond market currently stands at around $100 trillion. And well, now going a little bit more deep dive in what are these kind of instruments, what are green bonds? So green bonds are these debt instruments for financing or refinancing either projects related, as I was saying, like with environmental objectives or climate objectives. And who can issue these kind of instruments to fundraise their projects? Either companies, financial entities, non-financial entities, either national or subnational government entities, also cities. In this case, this is what we are today in this webinar. To explain you how cities can access to this kind of fundraising, right? But here with green bonds, like the most important part, I would say that it is that the resources raised through these kind of instruments are 100% used to finance green assets and projects, okay? And well, these kind of instruments work like regular bonds, but the green part of it, of the green component, is like an additional feature, right? So we are not reinventing the wheel here. Like bonds are instruments that have already been existing in the market for a long time, but now we are adding the green component to it. Then also these kind of instruments, they focused on label. It's important to identify that the label of being green is related to projects and assets to be financed and not to the issuer, okay? Not to the issue, the entity that is issuing the bond. That would mean that by labeling a bond, we are not saying that the city is green or the bank is green, but the asset and the project that it will be financed through this kind of instruments, okay? And some of the benefits, well, first of all, the reputation that will attract more investors. They will give more visibility to these kind of projects, and that will create like investors to be more interested in this kind of invest in these kind of projects, and access to broader and diversified investors based. Okay, then also I would like to highlight that green bonds are like this bridge between issuers. As I was saying, it could be banks, corporate, governments, and cities, and investors, you know, like the issuers are the entities that need to fundraise some projects, and investors are interested on fundraise this kind of instruments. So through green bonds, we can achieve also the compliance with SDG goals, right? Like the ones that we can see here in the screen. Through different kind of projects related, for example, with renewable energy, low carbon transportation, hydropower, buildings, green buildings, and so on and so forth. It's also important to mention that label bonds, when we're talking about label bonds, there are different kind of labels that you will see out there in the market, not only green bonds. When I was, as I was saying, like green bonds, the main goal is to fundraise projects related with environmental benefits, right? But we also have social bonds that are just the use of proceeds is specifically to fundraise projects related with social positive outcomes or objectives, right? And sustainability bonds, they are like the merge between the two universe or the two objectives to fundraise projects that have both the green component and the social component. Then the benefits of green bonds, I have already mentioned some of them, but also to complement that idea, well, local governments like city governments can access to low cost debt capital markets. They diversified their investors. Also marketing of climate change plans. Issuers can increase collaboration between financial and environmental departments. And in general, that's for the benefits for the issuers, but also these kind of instruments generate systematic benefits, right? Like, for example, foster green innovations, facilitate climate policies, contribute to public-private partnerships, development opportunities, and so on and so forth. Now, I would like to jump into another topic that I think it's quite relevant, the use of taxonomies, okay? Because CBI has been created their own taxonomy to guide investors and the whole financial users on what is how can we identify green and sustainable assets and projects, and to avoid the well-known greenwashing. So taxonomies are these classification systems that are used, as I was saying, to identify green and sustainable assets and projects. And taxonomies can be either green or sustainable, right? If we are talking about green, then we are talking about environmental objectives, and if we are talking about sustainable taxonomies, then we are talking not only about the environmental aspect, but also to comply with sustainable development goals. And the aim of these kind of guidance in these instruments are to create a uniform and harmonized classification system to avoid the fragmentation of the market, right? As I was saying, like, it's important that investors and issuers understand the same when we are talking about environmental investment. Also, taxonomies can protect against greenwashing and provide the basis for their policy actions, such as standards, labels, incentives, and so on and so forth. And in this other slide, I want to show you like how does the climate bonds initiative taxonomy looks like. So here we can see that climate bonds have developed this sector criteria for 8 different economic activities. So we have energy. We're going to talk about in more detail about those. We have water, buildings, land use, transportation, waste, and industry. And this is very important because for users, there is a clear guidance on what are the minimum requirements that the projects have to comply with in order to demonstrate alignment with the taxonomy, and then therefore like give the right signs to investors that we are aligning to the best practices out there in the market, right? So in climate bonds, we use a traffic light system to label the different activities and the level of alignment with the Paris Agreement goals, okay? So if we are talking about projects which we label as green, that means that they are automatically compatible with the taxonomy, and that means that they are aligned with the Paris Agreement goals. If we have projects with the amber label, that means that they will be compatible, those projects, if they comply with certain screening indicators. I will give an example after this. And then we have those assets and projects that are labeled as red, and that means that there's no way that we can consider those kind of projects as green. So anything related with fossil fuels, for example. So just for you know, to make this more pragmatic and for you to understand how does the green light system in the CBI taxonomy works, I brought some examples specifically for the energy sector. So here you can see in the screen that for the energy sector, we have developed criteria for different kind of energy sources: solar, wind, geothermal, hydropower, marine renewables, mixed energy, bioenergy, and some others. And as I was explaining, well, we have the green light system, right? And for each kind of activity inside the energy sector, we also provide like the asset type. That would mean, like in this example, like if we are talking about solar, then the asset type, generation facilities, power and heat. And there are some asset specifics if we are talking about photovoltaic generation facilities or concentrated solar power facilities. There is a differentiation between these two. And as I was saying, like if we have the amber label, that means that they have those projects have to comply with certain screening indicators or certain minimum requirements in order for them to turn into green, right? So in this case, for the generation facilities, the screening indicators is that the facilities should have no more than 50% of electricity generation from non-renewable energies, right? And for the other activities, like for example, any infrastructure dedicated to transmission and infrastructure, this kind of activity, well, is completely aligned with the Paris Agreement goals, and therefore there are no screening indicators to be complied with, and that's why it has like the green mark. And the same logic, here there is another example for bioenergy. In this case, like all the activities related with bioenergy, they will have to comply with the screening indicators, the ones that you can see in the screen: 80% of greenhouse gas emission reduction compared to fossil fuels baseline. And well, the last example that I brought you is the transmission and distribution infrastructure, and also the asset specific, what you can see here in the screen, that the taxonomy like sort of handhold us to understand what kind of projects can be considered green and aligned to the taxonomy in the energy sector, right? And what are the screening indicators that this kind of project has to comply with. So now I want to also share with you a couple of examples of sovereign green bonds related with energy. That means that the use of proceeds has been used to fundraise energy related projects in a subnational entities. The first example is the province of Jujuy in Argentina. They issue a bond, and in order to, well, the use of proceeds was used to fundraise some solar parks, the photovoltaic park in Cachuri, and 1, 2, and 3, with 100 megawatt hours of power production. And this was a very successful case study because they got the support of 130 investors from different jurisdictions: the United States, Brazil, Chile, England, Germany, and some other countries. And the second example, this is a very recent one, the New Jersey Economy Development Authority bond, and the use of proceeds it will be used to fundraise offshore wind port projects. And this issue was this bond, sorry, was issued early this year. And well, the main objective is to support the development of offshore wind projects in New Jersey and across the United States East seaboard. They have a capacity production of 11 gigawatts offshore wind power, or that's their goal by 2040. So this is also a very nice case study because it will be the first marine renewable energy bond related that it will be aligned to the climate bonds sector criteria. I would also like to share with you that the last month we had a workshop in Panama for 2 days. This workshop was well, our audience was subnational entities, and the objective it was to sort of hold on them and teach them how to start mobilizing, you know, internally in different cities in Panama, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Colombia, Uruguay, and Brazil. What are the capital plannings that they have to build, and also how can the projects can demonstrate the alignment with CBI taxonomy? What are the data that they need to gather in order to demonstrate alignment with the best practices in the market? So participants were able to explore governance structures, strategy, and framework development to fundraise mitigation and adaptation and resilience projects and assets. So it was a very interesting exercise that we have. And as we noticed that cities not always have the capacities to fundraise their projects through bonds. So we also explore and we explain them other options, not only label bonds or label debt, but also PPPs, public-private partnerships, blended finance, pool financing, and so on and so forth. And also participants had the opportunity to interact with potential investors through roundtables, where the participants were able to present their projects to potential investors, like, for example, from the IFC and others. And I will invite you to be well, to keep an eye on these kind of workshops that we currently offer, because I think this could be very, very useful for our audience to attend one of these workshops that we definitely will replicate around the globe. So that would be all from my side. Thank you so much. And I think like the Q&A is after.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really, really great, and to illustrate how the bonds work, actually, because sometimes it's hard to grasp exactly how we can make them work. And so thank you very much. It was very thorough and also well suited today to I think the audience that joined us today. Then I would like to give the floor to our next guest speaker before proceeding to the round of question and answers to Mr. Malika. And just if you have any questions, then again, please write them in the chat, since we will keep them and revert back to them after the presentation. Please, Mr. Malika, the floor is yours.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, where you are. Let me share my screen. I hope maybe Jome can help me
Yes,
see that this is working.
It is working.
Let me go from the beginning. So this session, my session is about project financing and innovative ways of financing energy projects. And so I'll start with some kind of a background about projects, what is important in terms of project development, but also what is important in terms of looking at the financing pathways. I have worked with a lot of local authorities and private sector in the energy space. But I think in the conversations, in the workshops, and in meetings, I think a lot of the institutions that I've been involved with, they are looking for the financing solution. But I think it's important also to understand what it takes to access finance. As you can understand, the conversations that we're having with investors is that there is a lot of money, but there are no projects, right? But if I ask the audience, they'll say, no, there's a lot of projects, there is no money. So I think there is a misunderstanding in terms of the people who are looking for money and the people who are providing money. So to be on the safe side, if we are supporting local government authorities and national institutions to access financing for energy, but also we have to be realistic in terms of what it takes to access this kind of money. So I wanted to start with just an introduction to project finance. So project finance is the financing of long-term infrastructure or individual projects. So this whole idea of a project, so everybody has to think about it, this is like a long-term project. So the definition here is straightforward. You can read it for yourself. But what is a project? So before you start sourcing projects and start looking for financing, I think the basics are important to think about. So this is an intense upfront capital requirements. A project is typically 10 to 25 years in terms of how long the project will last. And if you're looking for finance, you should think about, what assets will protect the investor finance. So if it is a project, if it is an infrastructure project, then you have to think about how investors are able to ring fence the revenue coming through so that they can pay. And the financing can be through debt or equity, and I can cover those of the financing options as we come. But I think the takeaway here for a project is it takes a long time, and the payback period also takes a long time. When we think about project and we're thinking about accessing finance, I think you have to be in an advanced stage that you have done your homework. So you cannot show up to a party if you're not prepared, if you're not dressed right. So you have to do your homework. So if you look at number one on your left is project identification. You have written your concept notes, you have approved, you have received all your preliminary approvals, you have done the concept designs. You go into the planning stage, meaning that you have resources that you have set aside in terms of budget, in terms of staffing. So many times I've been involved with local authorities and they have a project. And when you show up, they'll say, you need to give me money so that I can hire a consultant to do the feasibility study. Now, this is your project, right? So a starting point is you have to have your own house in order before somebody else can come and help you. And if they're coming to help you, I think you have to be, at least you have your concepts, at least have your feasibility studies ready. There was one local authority maybe there was one region in Tanzania. I can give this example very quickly. I had some money and I had only 3 months to disburse the money. And I asked 5 municipalities in that region. And I said, I have this money. I need you to present me with, a concept note, a basic feasibility, and some drawings, and a basic business plan. So I'm giving you 90 days to do that. Guess what? The richest and the biggest municipalities, they failed because they started asking for money for a consultant. Give me money so that I can hire a consultant for my project. Well, this is your project. But the poorest municipality, they were very creative. So what they did, they said, because when we had a conversation, I asked you, do you have engineers? They said, yes. Do you have an architect? They said, no, we don't have. Do you have somebody who can do quantity surveyor? The QS work? He said, no, we don't. So what they did, they went to the big cities and they asked for those people to be seconded to help them on a project. And they were able to actually deliver this in 3 months, and we gave money to the poorest municipality because they were creative. They thought, okay, this is our problem. If we don't have the money, then I know within municipalities there are all kinds of engineers who can do the work. But I think the attitude is always like, this is our project, but you need to come and do it for us. So with that story, I think let's look at all these steps that I will share this presentation, so I don't need to take you through all the steps. We have only like 15 minutes. So we'll move on to establishing total project cost. So I did this on purpose because I want you to understand what it takes to develop a project. And I did this on purpose because I want you to start thinking about what somebody who's going to give you money is thinking, right? So you have to look at the elements of total project costs. You have your capital expenditure, you have development fees, meaning that you have to have some budgets to pay for certain things that is required. You have to consider things like interest during construction. Construction takes 18 months. If you receive money today, the interest you start paying today. And so these are the things that, somebody who's going to give you money is looking at. So he's thinking, okay, great, you have a project. Do you have at least 25% in terms of your own contribution, in terms of land, in terms of your technical expertise that you have put in to put together the project, and you'll be seeking 70% maybe of debt financing. Possible solutions, PPP is one option, so we'll talk a little bit about it, and I know maybe you know a lot about this path. There's a debt component and there's also equity component for projects. But also you can go to domestic capital markets and you can raise bonds, like green bonds. I'll touch a little bit at high level on this because I think Arias had covered part of this. But also, if you're a local government authority, sometimes a portion of the funding can come through the central government as grants or your own source of revenue. So PPP, there are multiple authorities. If you go to the World Bank website, you can read about the entire process for starting, the PPP project inception, PPP project preparation, the procurement process, and the contracting process. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think this is a very clear opportunity in terms of funding sources for your project. You can have your project, but you can choose to go the PPP process, but you have to understand the PPP process, but also you have to understand your own internal laws in terms of PPPs, because they vary from one country to another. This is one source of financing projects. Power projects can be financed like this. So the best way, once you have your concept note, once you have your basic feasibility studies, you can write a project information memorandum and you can put it up to possible private sector investors who can come in and do their own feasibility, bring in money to do the the construction, the equipment, and and then you can just give them a concession for a number of years. Option number 2 is debt, and debt can be corporate finance. So basically, you have a power project and you go to the bank. Your laws allow you to receive money, loans from the bank. So at this point, if you're going to the bank, then this is a corporate loan. They're looking at the strength of your balance sheet and your track record in terms of finances. They'll be looking at collateral. What are the assets will be collateral? Most of the time, the banks will follow the central bank's guidelines, which are very strict. And in most cases, whoever is investing is giving you a loan for a big infrastructure project, energy project. They'll be seeking sovereign guarantee. So this is one option if you are going to the bank. The other option is if you do what is called project finance, and either a bank or any other investor can come in and invest. Now here you are not looking at the strength of your balance sheet. Here you're looking at the strength of your cash flows. So if you look at the light green, these are the cash flows. So your cash flow and the revenues coming from the project, they are stronger than your debt service. The dark green is your payments. So that means this is a bankable project because your revenues and your cash flows are stronger than your payments. So in most cases, if you have a project that is bankable, you have a project that its cash flow can support the project, you don't need a sovereign guarantee. You most likely you need certain credit enhancements in order for you to be able to do this. So it's pure project finance. If the project fails, it is the project that failed. There is no recourse to the municipality. The first one, which was this one, if the project fails because it is based on the strength of the balance sheet of the municipality, then the recourse is to the municipality. So this is a better option, but I think it is also the project has to be very good, has to be very well prepared, and you have to put a lot of efforts to get to that point. So I think it's important to understand lenders' risk and financing considerations. If I'm a lender and you bring your project to me, these are the risks I'm looking at, right? I'm looking at the feasibility. Do you have data that can prove that in the long term, this project can work? Do you have your permits, your licenses? Do you have capacity to pull this off? And also sometimes they're looking at so who did your feasibility study? I mean, if it is an independent party, it's a reputable institution, then your feasibility is better than doing it in-house and have one of yours do it in-house. I'm looking at the construction or the engineering work, who is qualified contractor that you expect to hire, who's going to supervise the project, and all of that. Is looking at the market. So who's going to buy this? If you are, it's a power plant and the offtake is somebody reputable, maybe a national power company, then maybe this is guaranteed that it's going to work. They look at operations, they look at your financials, how much equity you're putting in. They look at the debt service coverage ratio. Usually it is 1.3, and they look at internal rate of return, which is over for equity, which is in over 15%. So it really depends who you're going to. If you're going to impact investors, it's 15% equity IRR. But if you're going to your pure commercial investors, then maybe they'll be looking for higher internal rate of return. So the other path is domestic bonds. Maybe before I go here, there's an equity consideration. This is all about debt, but there's an equity consideration if you want to your project to be considered as equity. One path is through UNCDF. We have what is called an International Municipal Investment Fund. This one is pure infrastructure projects from municipal. And I think I don't have information handy, but if you Google UNCDF and you Google IMIF, International Municipal Investment Fund, you'll see the contacts and the guidelines for applying. Now, so basically, this is an equity fund. You submit your project. They'll go through the screening process, and if you're successful, Meridiam as a fund manager, and so they'll come in and they'll provide equity to the project, and maybe depending on your laws, they'll be able to run it for a period of time and then turn it over, or otherwise there are all kinds of arrangements when they give you pure equity. At this point, you don't need a bank, and you don't need to put any money up front. So that was equity. So the domestic capital markets, I think in many least developed countries and developing countries, I think this is a very viable option for large projects, for municipalities, and for maybe even state-owned enterprises. And rather than doing what is called a general obligation bond, which is basically saying your strength of your balance sheet will be the reason you're raising money from the capital market. So, for many municipalities, I think they fail for a number of reasons. But I think you can forget about those kind of bonds. You can do what is called a revenue bond or a project bond. And this is based on the strength of the project. So if you can do a revenue bond, then you can make those bonds thematic, and you can say, here is a bond. Part of the proceeds of the bond money will be used to do maybe conservation stuff and all the climate-related work. So very specific use of proceeds towards climate resilience and conservations and environment. And then of course with that you go through the what you call assessment and get a certification to be a green bond. So you can go to Climate Bond Initiative, or you can go to other ones. We're just completing a green bond in Tanzania, and we have decided to go through ICMA, which is the International Capital Markets Association. They have their own green bond standards as well. So understanding revenue bonds. So this is, I think it's a lot of information here. It's an alternative way of financing development. You can finance power projects, large-scale projects through the capital markets. You will issue a bond. The bond will be backed by independent income streams of the project. So basically the project has to be strong. Many power projects, they're very strong independent income streams. The independence from a country's overall debt burden. So if you go through the capital markets, you are getting your money from investors. So there's no need to be asked for a sovereign guarantee, because if you go to the bank, they'll ask you for a sovereign guarantee, or if you go to other international investors or local investors, they'll say, where's the guarantee from the government? In this situation, you don't need it because because of the what we call the credit enhancements that are added to the project, meaning that you can have a guarantee which is part of provided by third parties. So this will be very different from the one that is provided by your government. Rationale for revenue bonds. Long-term finance. Infrastructure project is long-term, so you need long-term capital. If you are infrastructure project for energy, the payback period is 10 years. You go to the bank, they offer funding for 5 years. You know for sure you will not be able to pay back in 5 years, and you are basically looking for trouble. So you should look for the sources whereby you can receive long-term capital, patient capital. So we talked about credit enhancements. So these are basically risk mitigation strategies. UNCDF now is starting what is called a guarantee facility for cities. This is a third-party guarantee to the project. It can guarantee up to 50% of the project, meaning that if there is a default or the project fails, up to 50% of that money will be paid back to the investors. But also there's a cost of guarantee to be considered. In order to get a guarantee, I think in most cases it has to be through an SPV. If it's a municipality's project, the municipality has to set up a special purpose vehicle, an investment company, and that's the one that will receive guarantee, and that's the one that will manage the project. So I know I'm running out of time, so let me jump to a case study here very quickly. I'll give you an example of a project that we completed in Tanzania. It is called Ijangala Small Hydropower Project. I think it was like maybe 2.4 megawatt. You can see there are many players in this small power project in a very rural area. It is so if you look at the pie, you'll see the biggest pie, which is 25%, was financed by Tanzania Investment Bank. So this is a development bank. They provided a loan of 25%, which is about $400,000. The other big pie was provided by a national rural energy agency as grant, and the grant specifically, if you go down here, it will say the grant was feasibility studies, connections, and project completion, up to 24%. If you look at an NGO also provided a grant, so it's good to have friends who can do this. And there was 19% from the promoter. They provided equity of 19% into the project. So I think this is where I think many projects, they fail before they start, because this equity component, which you can find a way to quantify it, it has to be strong. You have UNIDO providing a grant, and the grant from UNIDO was for procurement of electromechanical equipment. I know UNIDO is they do a lot of these kind of support in many countries. UNCDF, we provided a grant of 50%, and this was the last mile. When you are doing your project, you've been doing it for years, you spend a lot of money, and then you run out of money to do the smallest thing after you've done 95% of the work, and then you get delayed for a year or two just because you don't have $50,000. So we provided that, and what we did was, it's called a reimbursable grant. So it's an interest-free loan. If you look at this is blended finance. So you're blending the grants, the loans, and the concessional finance that you can find. So it's an energy project, a small hydropower project. A scenario like this can be instead of being this company, because basically this company is actually a church that did this. but it can be a local government authority. And you can look at the type of partners who are here, and you can see the kind of support that you can get. So with that, I submit, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I would like to give the floor to ask everyone to type your questions in the chat if you have any for our speakers today, Irais and Peter. And given that we have a very limited time left, I would like to request and the speakers to be very, very concise and try to stick to 1 minute response. Since I don't see any questions yet, perhaps I would like to address one question to Irais. So what is the overview and general understanding of bonds, equity financing, and other financing options? So what does it take for a project in the energy sector to obtain investment through bonds? I know it's a long question, but if you can be concise, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jaume, for the question. So I will be very straightforward. I would say the most important aspects that the issuer should consider are, first of all, project viability. So investors are expecting to see, this economical viability and a well-defined project in terms of technical aspects and financial credit, like a financial plan, like how they are planning to comply with the responsibilities that they are assuming when issuing a bond, right? Also a business plan and a perspective. This is a document that should be provided to investors with comprehensive information about the project, the risk that has been measured and assessed, and its potential returns. Creditworthiness as well. Well, the issuer needs to establish the creditworthiness. That this means that this can be achieved by demonstrating a strong financial track record and providing guarantees or collateral to back to the bond issue. I would say also risk mitigation. This means that they implement risk mitigation strategies such as insurance and hedge to protect investors from adverse events that could impact the projects and therefore the financial performance.
Thank you, Irais. I think that's also additional information that is really appreciated by all the attendees. And following up on the comment from Irais, Peter, so what are the key elements or steps during the development of a project that will, in this case, an energy project, that will secure access to climate finance later on? Peter, you are muted. Perfect.
I was on mute. So I think it is important to understand that a project is project. There's a project development process, right? So once you go through that process, then you have an option of going through the climate finance route. Because even in climate finance route, they will still ask you for your bankable documents. They'll ask you for your feasibility studies. They'll ask you for your engineering documents, your approvals, and everything. So you can go whichever way you want, and if you want to go climate finance, you cannot skip the project development steps.
Thank you, Peter. And in the meantime, we had a question actually from the chat asking what are the specific requirements for a subnational government to apply to the UNCDF facility. I assume in this case they're asking about IMIF.
Yes. So we have been receiving a lot of requests. So usually there is a call for proposal, that we do. But if you are out of that window for call for proposal, you can still submit your request directly to UNCDF, to the IMF fund. But I think we receive a lot of maybe concept notes, or a project that it's an idea. Right? So that's the challenge, because for us, I think if you've been working on this project, you have your complete set of documents, at least have your pre-feasibility study completed. That is a very good starting point to apply to the international, to the IMF, to the International Municipal Investment Fund. Get up to a point where you have a pre-feasibility at least, before you even go into the full feasibility.
Thank you, Peter, for the concise answer. And thank you both of you, Idais and Peter. I will then proceed with the latest pieces of information we wanted to share today. So in order to do this homework, as Peter Malika put it, and to help you prepare all these projects, ICLEI has its own Transformative Actions Program, which is a project pipeline for subnational demand-driven, also demand-driven projects. And we act as a project preparation facility, and we help you with tailored services to guide the project development to achieve maturity and be finance ready. And we're also an advocacy instrument. So it needs to be a local and subnational government or partners that submit this idea. It needs to be an infrastructure project. In this case, will be an energy and infrastructure project that addresses climate change and the sustainable development goals and has a high transformative impact. Next slide, please. So I'm just gonna skim through this briefly. So in order for you to apply to this, to Transformative Actions Program, you can submit your application at tap-potential.org, and we can provide you tailored feedback and clarifications on how to improve, how to prepare, and how to do this homework, and allow this project to be more concise and stronger. So once it is strong enough, we will welcome it into our pipeline, and then we can provide all these kind of services. All right, then I would like to go to the next slide. So this is our last energy exchanges for the first season, and season 2 will follow soon. Please, next slide. So this is part of the 100 RE, Renewable Cities and Regions for Energy Compact and Network. I encourage everyone to get involved with our work on 100% renewables. Feel free to reach out to us via the email that you see below, and let's explore how we can support through our initiatives and work together towards a sustainable energy future. Your engagement is highly valued, and together we can make a positive impact. Next slide. So here I would like to thank first our speakers today. Special thanks to you, Idais and Peter, for dedicating your time and sharing your expertise and insights with us. It has been a great learning experience for all of us. And also want to extend my heartfelt thanks to our Season 1 partners. As you can see them here, including the Urban Transitions Mission and including the Climate Bonds Initiative and UNCDF. And last but not least, thank you for your attention. These slides will be published on the renewables roadmap.iclei.org. The link will be also shared to the website in the chat. And please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you have any further questions. And well, thank you very much for attending here the webinar. Thank you all, and I wish you a wonderful day ahead.